overnight guns have been fired near Kabul airport as thousands of people continue their attempts to free Afghanistan in the wake of the Taliban takeover.
During Wednesday's parliamentary debate, the former Prime Minister, Theresa May, spoke powerfully when she described the UK's lack of action to support the Afghan government as incomprehensible. And in the Lords, former MI5 chief Lady Manningham-Buller warned the Taliban victory would inspire and embolden those who wish to promote jihad against the West. Joining us to discuss the situation now from his Lancashire constituency is the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace. Ben, good morning to you and thank you for taking the time. We know how busy you are at the moment. I wanted to just start by asking you, one of the stories around today, there's a story on the front of the Mail today which you must have seen, and it is about the Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, and it says that on Friday of last week, the embassy in Kabul advised him to call his counterpart, the foreign minister in Afghanistan, to help get translators out. That call was delegated to a more junior minister, and the call then didn't happen because over in Afghanistan, the foreign minister wanted to speak to his exact rank, his exact counterpart. And there is concern and belief among some people that actually some translators weren't saved because Dominic Raab didn't make that call. You spoke emotionally on this show and on LBC on Monday about how some people might not be saved or rescued. And I'm sure you meant translators within that statement. How do you feel about that story?
Well, first of all, Richard, I genuinely don't know my colleagues' call sheets, etc. But I know that last Friday, because I was up through the night as many members of the government were, and indeed my soldiers, etc., were doing so, the only thing that mattered on that Friday was keeping the airport open, and that the Afghan government was almost virtually gone at that stage. And we remember the rapid disappearance over those 2 days of the Afghan president and the leadership. And I know, because I've been dealing with it on and off for many, many days, that no phone call would have made the slightest difference at that time. The only difference would have been securing the airport, and the debate at the time was whether or not we sent military forces in, whether or not civilian flights would continue to fly. And if you remember, that was the big dividing line when scheduled flights stopped. When the Afghan military melted away, that was the only thing that mattered. So, whether or not Dominic Raab was supposed to make a phone call or not, I genuinely don't know. But what I would say is, just like I do, I have a call list as long as my arm for today. Some of those calls have to be prioritised around what calls will make a difference. So he may well have done that, but I don't think that the damage that is being speculated in the media is correct.
Another story, and I'm not trying to deliberately set you against Dominic Raab here, but there was another story about yourself, which is that after America decided to pull out its 3,000 or so troops in Afghanistan, that you were almost alone within the cabinet in trying to put together a coalition that could replace those troops to prevent what has just happened from happening. I'm sure you're familiar with that story being reported. Is it true?
Well, that wasn't a cabinet discussion, so that part is definitely not true. I went to NATO, I spoke to Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General, I spoke to a number of the big NATO nations and tried at the time, and that was just militarily. The defence ministers would often say with regret that it wasn't possible, but their systems or their parliaments were not up for it. So I don't know. We didn't have a sort of cabinet discussion around that because NATO policy is done through the foreign minister, the prime minister and the defence secretary, and that's how I reached out to NATO partners. So I don't know of it. I know that the end result, the challenge was very few, almost no countries were interested in prolonging where we were.
Okay.
Really, I want to talk to you as a soldier and politician as well. And in relation to moments like that, you've talked very movingly about what you feel, as a soldier, having experienced what those that are there and those that have been involved in Afghanistan will be feeling right now. And I wonder if, wearing your two hats as Defence Secretary, I wonder if it's tough when you're trying to talk to people who haven't served, trying to explain to them why it's important, and who wins in that situation? Do you get the respect for having that experienced? Because it felt, watching some of the testimony yesterday in the Commons, as though there was a lot of frustration from all sides of the House that senior members of this government hadn't been listening.
Look, one of the challenges is when you're a soldier or a sailor, Air Force, you are trained to function in a way that is sort of can-do and often at risk. And that is just the DNA of what we do. It's why in COVID, you'll find governments around the world reach for their militaries to move at speed. The governments of today, civilian governments, are big oil tankers. They take incredibly long time to turn around. Doesn't matter who's running those governments. They are complex. They are responsive to the media agenda. They're responsive to facts that often change faster than they are. And as a soldier, we know that in the environments we're deployed, they are high risk. And that's why the military system is about devolving authority. It's not about centralizing it. I remember on your program in COVID, during COVID, the first thing I did was get rid of my authorities and give them to my soldiers on the ground to make decisions.
Feel that it wasn't devolved to you, some of those decisions? I'm not sure if that's a yes or no as to whether you were listened to as a former soldier as well, because there seems to be some huge tactical errors. I only found out the last 12 hours that actually the Taliban has fighting seasons. They don't fight in the winter. So when America decided, when Biden decided he wanted everybody out before 9/11 because of that emotional American moment, that was a very bad time to do it. Whereas if it had been left till later, the government there could have had 6 months to establish it. Did you know that? Were you arguing that? Was anybody listening?
So there is a fighting season, as they call it, in Afghanistan for all of them, and not just for the Taliban. I mean, the Afghan history is full of fighting tribes and fighting cultures. So they absolutely have a fighting season. I think it's not my conflict, Afghanistan, and I think that the thing as a soldier that we should reflect. We all have our own conflicts. All our memories and our experiences are linked to the conflict we served in, and so while there is often a common thread, our experiences are defined by that. And you will have heard Nick Carter yesterday talk about working with the Taliban, or at least having to engage with them. That's a man who will have lost soldiers, fought at different ranks in his military career, but recognizing that he has to deal with the facts dealt to him as they are now. I think you're right. Understanding the country is always part of the issue. And, do I think the Taliban are going to back to where they are? Well, I think partly they won't, because when they lost power for 20 years. Afghanistan needs trade. It needs open borders. And funny enough, I've got reports today of a border crossing to Pakistan now being open again. I think that's really important for our people who we need to get out, to have some reassurance.
Ben, I know you have to go in a second, but I want one last question before you have to. I know you've got to run off, but it's an important question as Defence Secretary, which is, it's a dangerous situation at the airport. What happens if the Taliban kill any British military at that airport? What is your response? What do we do?
Well, so we have plans. We always plan for the worst. We have definitely plans to defend ourselves. That's why we deployed 16 Air Assault Brigade, which is is a fighting brigade if it has to. I've just authorised the deployment of another company of paras to go in to make sure they support. But what I can say, and there is some good news today, but there's also bad news. The good news is, at the moment, the majority of our people, not everyone, are getting through. When we call them forward, they are getting to the processing centre. And that is a good piece of news, contrary to some of the media reports that are sort of saying they're not being allowed in. One of the bad news is that actually the local Taliban are letting everyone through, and there's a public order problem, which is very much what you see on the media, on the telly, and that's really tough for soldiers. I've been in public order situations in riots. Soldiers are trained in public order, but it's not a pleasant environment. And in this environment, every day, hours and hours, these soldiers are facing heartbreaking scenes and are having to try and manage it. And That is something that I absolutely admire in their restraint. But look, we haven't seen the Taliban trying to attack us. And I think the Taliban know that the best thing for them is for us to get out of the way and get out of the country. And therefore, I think that's why they're not standing in the way of the process. But it's not perfect for everyone. You might be living in parts of Afghanistan that's difficult. And I've been honest about that not everyone will get out. What I have said is we're investing in regional hubs nearby in third countries. The Home Secretary has moved the traditional difficulties in processing of third countries so that we can process those people in the long run, and our scheme will not close. It will remain open no matter what happens.
Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.